Right, so before we get into the story, let me explain the parameters of my story. So the universe of Stargate takes place roughly along the same timeline as real life. So my story will be set in 2024 and take place after the events of the entire Stargate show, and will not include any of the comic books or novels or any of the short stories that came out after the show's runtime. So with the parameters set, here we go. The episode opens up with a montage of events like Stargate Universe did already, showing the discovery of the ship by the Icarus crew, Dr. Rush's discovery of the bridge and the reason for Destiny's construction, and then ending with the crew going into stasis with Eli left alone on the observation deck looking out into space. Fade to black. Fade in. 2014 Earth orbit. A newly constructed BC 304 orbits Earth. The ship is being boarded by the crew, with many supplies being transported into the cargo bays. On the bridge, we see the commander of the ship talking over the view screen with Stargate Command. The crew and the cargo are being transported now, General Carter, as the camera pans to the view screen showing General Samantha Carter, now leader of the SGC, on screen. Understood, Colonel. While the ship is being loaded, let's go over the mission. The Hermes is the latest 304 off the pipeline and is outfitted with the new Asgard power core and fitted with a ZPM. Your mission is to follow the path that the Destiny has travelled throughout the universe and to catch up to her and attempt to rescue her crew. This mission is not without risk, and you and your crew will be away from Earth for many years. You have all volunteered for this mission knowing the risks involved. Once the ship departs Earth and enters hyperspace, you and your crew will enter the newly constructed stasis pods that are aboard the Hermes and sleep for the duration of the journey. The Asgard Core's AI of Thor will set the ship on autopilot and monitor the crew while in stasis. The AI will wake you and your crew roughly 10 years from now when you are approaching Destiny's last known coordinates. And when you reach Destiny, your mission is to rescue the crew and then effect repairs to the Destiny to bring it back to full health, and then transport the new Destiny crew over to continue Destiny's mission. Once your mission is complete, you and your ship, with any of the surviving Destiny crew that wants to return home, are to set a return course and return home. This mission will take years before you return home, so from everyone here and for the crew of the Destiny and their families, we thank you all for your sacrifice. Godspeed, Hermes. The view screen turns off. The colonel then turns and walks to his chair and sits. He then turns to the lieutenant. How we coming with the cargo? The lieutenant replies, complete, sir. All crew and cargo aboard, and engine room confirms all systems green for launch. The colonel then hits the button on his chair and addresses the crew. Crew of the Hermes, this mission is a risky one. Our job is to rescue the crew of the Destiny and repair her so she may continue her mission, but due to how far out in the universe the Destiny is, there is a chance we may never return home. You have all volunteered for this mission and are the best and brightest men and women we could have asked for. Once we enter hyperspace, we will all go into stasis until we reach the Destiny. Many years will have passed when we wake up, but our mission stands. Good luck everyone, and Godspeed. Beep. The colonel turns off the PA. Lieutenant, set a course and enter hyperspace, the colonel utters. The Hermes departs Earth and jumps to hyperspace. Fade to black. 10 years later. The Hermes flying through hyperspace, the ship all dark and quiet as the camera pans throughout the ship. The camera, now looking at the Asgard computer core, sees a blinking light. A hologram of Thor appears and touches a stone on the computer. The ship's lights come on and the ship powers up. The camera pans to a hold where the stasis pods are located. They light up and start to open. The crew, disorientated, starts exiting the stasis pods and assume their roles. The colonel, now awake and on the bridge, looks out of the window as the ship drops from hyperspace. The ship drops between the void between galaxies, and directly in front of the Hermes, appearing as a small dot, is the Destiny. As the Hermes approaches the Destiny, the ship starts to get bigger within the window, and the colonel turns to the lieutenant. Is that the lieutenant interrupts. Yes sir, that's the Destiny. It appears to be adrift, roughly 20,000 light years from the next galaxy. Sensors show no energy readings, sir. The Colonel mumbles, "Are we too late?" The camera pans over the adrift Destiny as the Hermes pulls up alongside her. The lieutenant turns to the Colonel. "The ship has no life support and no power." "Wait, sir, I'm detecting low levels of power coming from within the ship. But it's faint, sir, barely registering." The Colonel, curious, radios for a team to be assembled and to beam over and investigate. The camera pans throughout the darkened halls of the Destiny, showing the mess hall, the living quarters, along with other areas of the ship, all dark and quiet. Then suddenly, the light of the transporter beam illuminates the gate room as a 6-man team beams to the ship. The team in pressure suits begin to explore the ship, going from one room to the next. Silent and dark, with no signs of life, the team continues to explore, heading towards the power source they detected earlier. After a little while, they arrive at a door. They press the button for it to open, and nothing happens. With the power readings coming from the other side of the door, the team persists and pries the door open, and they enter the room. The room is the stasis room that the Icarus crew reside in. The team walks through the room looking at the pods, with some of the pods still functioning, with their occupants alive, and others not, with the occupants deceased. The team starts to count the pods that are active and find that about 40% of the pods have failed, but the remaining pods are still functional, with the occupants still alive. The team radios the Hermes and reports on the situation. The Colonel, saddened at the losses but also relieved that there are survivors, addresses the crew. "Crew of the Hermes, I report that we have found the crew of the Destiny, and I'm happy to say that most are alive. However, some of the crew did not survive. As sad as this is to hear, we have a job to do. Everyone to your stations and prepare to beam over to the Destiny to conduct repairs. Engine room, disconnect the ZPM and prepare for transport to the Destiny. We will use the ZPM to restore power to the ship and revive the crew." The Hermes crew begins to beam over to the Destiny and start effecting repairs. The camera pans throughout the Destiny's dark halls, showing engineers working, when suddenly the lights flicker and come on. Air starts to come out the vents as the ship begins to hum and come alive. With the ZPM now powering the Destiny and the life support now online, the Colonel beams over and begins to prepare to revive the crew from stasis. Now, for the crew that are alive, it depends on the actors who would come back to the show, but let's just say for my story that Rush, Young, Scott and Eli and Tamara are still alive. So the scene starts from black to then blurred eyes opening to them focusing on the Colonel as Colonel Young awakens from his stasis. He stumbles out the pod and asks, "Who are you?" The Colonel, holding up Young, replies, "We're from Earth. We came to rescue you." "Through the gate?" Young replies. The Colonel chuckles, "No, we travelled here on the Hermes, a Daedalus class ship with the sole purpose of rescuing you." "A ship?" Young says, surprised. "How long have we been in stasis?" "You have been in stasis for 10 years. 10 years, Young says to himself. "What about the rest of my crew?" Young says urgently to the Colonel. The Colonel replies with sadness, "Just over half the crew survived stasis, sir. The rest are deceased." Young, with a saddened look, looks over and sees Dr. Rush stumbling out of his pod. Rush looks up and says, "Where's Eli?" Fade to black. Scene. Fade in on a dark planet, raining with flashes of lightning, a shadowy figure running through the trees and bushes, appearing to be chasing an animal. The shadowy figure jumps upon a rock and throws a spear, striking down the animal. The shadowy figure approaches the downed animal, and with a flash of lightning, the shadowy figure is revealed. It's Eli. Fade to credits. As the episode begins, we open up with a Kino camera activating, revealing Eli. He begins to talk to the camera. "So, it's been just over a week since the crew entered the stasis pods, and I'm no closer to fixing the last pod. The part I need to fix to get the pod working, I can't replicate or bypass it. I need a replacement part. I still got a few more days before I have to shut off the life support system, so hopefully I can fix it in time. Wish me luck." The Kino recording ends. A new Kino recording activates. It's Eli again. This time, he's in a dark room illuminated by only the console. He turns to the Kino and speaks. So it's been 3 weeks since the crew entered the pods, and I bet you're wondering why I'm not dead, as I was supposed to turn off the life support system a week ago, so that Destiny has enough power to cross to the next galaxy. Well, I realised I wouldn't be able to fix the pod in time, so as I went up to the bridge and I sat staring out into space, and while I was contemplating my own death, I wondered if the energy streaks surrounding Destiny could be converted into power. Well, I won't bore you with all the details, but I figured it out. So by lowering the solar collectors during FTL, Destiny can charge while at flight, but it is a very small amount of power. Luckily though, it has bought me a few extra months, and if I ration additional food and power by only keeping life support system on minimum and sleeping in the botany lab to reduce the life support system even more while I sleep, I should add a month or two extra before the end comes. Hopefully that should be plenty of time to figure all of this out so I don't die. End of recording. The final recording activates, showing Eli very skinny and malnourished, standing in the gate room. He stood at the gate console pressing buttons and starts to speak. It's now over 8 months after the crew went into stasis, and we are currently halfway between the galaxies. I have stretched the power supply to its very limits, and just as I was about to shut off the life support system and face the end, so that Destiny could cross the void, Destiny's computer detected a Stargate on the edge of the next galaxy. But Destiny was still out of range to dial it, so I came up with a plan. It would take another 2 weeks at FTL to get within minimum range of the Stargate, but that would use up all the remaining power to reach the next galaxy. So I crunched the numbers, and I decided to take a gamble. If I shut off every system except the FTL engines, the stasis pods, and the minimum life support for the gate room only, it should buy me the time I needed to get in range and give me time to work out the only solution I have left. So I have programmed Destiny to drop out of FTL as soon as it's within range of the Stargate and dial. Then as soon as I'm through the gate, Destiny will shut off every system and conserve power to power only the stasis pods, and hopefully this gives me time to figure out how to save the crew. The camera then pans to Destiny dropping out of FTL and then cuts to the gate room as the gate starts to dial. This is it. I hope this works, Eli says, pressing a couple of buttons on the console. He then turns around and dons an EV suit. The gate then activates and Eli turns to the Kino and says, "To anyone that sees this, I hope I did the right thing, and if I didn't, please forgive me." He then turns to the gate and with great hesitation walks through. The gate shuts down and the room goes dark. End of recording. Fade in to Dr. Rush and Colonel Young watching the recordings of the Kino on a console. "Eli, you took a rather risky gamble there," Rush says out loud, softly to himself. Young turns to Rush and says, "Yeah, and how did he survive 8 months? There was only enough food to last him a month or two max." "Well, he must have rationed what he had and possibly used the botany lab for additional food. Just look at Eli in the last recording. He's extremely malnourished, so he probably didn't have food left," Rush says, being slightly impressed and concerned at the state of Eli. The colonel of the Hermes, Colonel Edwards, turns to Rush and Young. "We should send a team to the planet he went to and find out what happened to Eli if we can." Overhearing this from the other side of the room, Scott and Greer interrupt and say, "We volunteered to go find him. If he's alive, it might be better for him to see a familiar face." Young nods and agrees and says, "Take 5 additional men and TJ, just in case you find him alive." "Yes sir," Scott says. The camera pans to Scott and Greer and TJ and a team of Marines in the gate room. The gate begins to dial. Rush at the controls says to the team, "This is the only gate in range and the one Eli went to, but we will send a Kino first to make sure it is safe, as Eli left in an EV suit and we don't know what planet we will find." The gate activates and a Kino flies past the team and enters the Stargate. The camera pans to Rush's console where the monitor is showing a dark raining forest with O2 present and safe for humans. "It's safe," Rush says to the team. The team then proceeds to go through the Stargate. Fades black. to the camera now panning over the dark rainforest. The gate now enters the frame as the team exits the Stargate. Scott says to Greer, "Right, we're going to spread out and look for any signs of Eli. Stay alert and watch out for any dangers that might be lurking in this forest." The team heads off into the forest as the camera zooms out and fades to black. Fade in to a shot of Destiny and the Hermes side by side as repairs are still being made to the Destiny. The camera panning through the corridors as both the Destiny crew and the Hermes crew make repairs to various systems. The camera then pans up onto the bridge to Rush at a console looking over the ship's systems. Colonel Young walks in with Colonel Edwards and asks Rush for a status report. Rush turns to Young a bit frustrated and says, "The repairs are coming along nicely, but it's the power systems. They're struggling with the power output of the ZPM. We already have 4 conduits that have blown or fused while transferring the power around the ship. Destiny was not designed to use the power of the ZPM, and we need to get the engines back online and jump to the nearest star to get Destiny back on its own power as soon as possible. And according to the database, the nearest G-type star is a month away, on the very edge of the next galaxy. But I'm having issues here getting the engines online. There appears to be a lockout code in place and I can't override it." Suddenly, an alarm goes off on the bridge. Rush hurries to another console and hits a button. "Oh no," he says with fear in his voice. "A drone control ship has just dropped out of FTL. How did they find us?" As Rush looks up at both colonels, the camera then pans to the intergalactic void with the drone control ship stationed at a fair distance from the Destiny. A few seconds go by and then just as the control ship releases the smaller drones, another 2 control ships exits FTL, totaling 3 control ships. Back on the bridge of the Destiny, Young announces over the radio the situation to the crew as Colonel Edwards beams back over to the Hermes and prepares to defend the Destiny from attack. Colonel Edwards, now on the bridge of the Hermes, says, "Battle stations, arm the Asgard beam weapons, railguns and missiles, and raise the shields, and prepare to defend the Destiny." Young on the bridge of the Destiny orders the crew to prepare and to arm the pulse cannons, and says to Rush, "We need those FTL engines." Rush, agitated, says, "I'm trying. This lockout code is not easy to break. I'm going to need some time." The camera then pans over Destiny and the Hermes in the backdrop of the void. The Hermes then begins to move off and positions itself in between Destiny and the control ships. Destiny is stationary with her engines off. The camera then pans to all the control ships' drones that have now been launched, and with the camera now following the couple hundred drones that are now heading towards both ships. The Hermes begins to fire its railguns at the smaller drones, trying to stop them from passing, but many just fly right by, heading directly towards the Destiny. The drones, now in range of the Destiny, begin to fire. "Why aren't we firing?" shouts Young. "There's a power surge, rerouting the power now." "Okay, the cannons are online," Rush shouts. The camera then pans over to Young. "Fire at will." The Destiny begins to fire its cannons as it starts to take damage from the drones. Young then radios the Hermes. "Colonel Edwards, we need to destroy the control ships. Once they're destroyed, the smaller drones will stop attacking." "Understood, Colonel Young. Helm, set a course." The camera pans to the Hermes, firing its railguns, destroying many drones in its path. "Target the control ship," orders Colonel Edwards. "Fire the beam weapons." The Hermes, powering through the drones towards one of the control ships, fires its beams and destroys it. The other 2 drone ships begin to focus their fire on the Hermes and begins to concentrate their fire on it. "Now, fire on the next one," shouts Colonel Edwards as sparks and explosions occur on the bridge, due to the Hermes taking increasing fire from the drones. "Shields down to 60%, sir," shouts the Major in the right control station. "Focus fire on the control ships with the beam weapons and screen those drone fighters with the railguns," orders Colonel Edwards. The Hermes, moving swiftly through the swarm of drones, gets within range of the next control ship and fires its beams. The control ship takes a direct hit and explodes. "One to go," says Colonel Edwards, when suddenly the Hermes takes extreme damage as a few dozen drones kamikaze the Hermes, while the other half of the drones form a barrier around the last control ship to protect it. "Beam weapons disabled, sir, and shields are at 20%. We can't take another hit like that," shouts the Major. The camera then pans back to Destiny, struggling to hold off the attacking drones. "The shields can't take much more of this," Young states. Young then hails the Hermes. "Colonel, we need cover. The Destiny shields are weakening. We can't take much more damage." Back on the bridge of the Hermes, the Colonel orders Hermes back to the Destiny to provide defensive fire. The camera then pans to the Hermes swooping by the Destiny, firing its railguns, destroy many drones, giving Destiny's shields a small reprieve. The Hermes continues to fly around the Destiny, providing cover fire as the camera then cuts to the bridge of the Destiny. "How about those engines?" Young shouts to Rush. "I still can't bypass the lockout code. It's like Destiny is preventing me from doing so. I don't know what else to do," a very frustrated Rush says. The camera then pans to a wide shot of both the Destiny and the Hermes, surrounded by 100 or so smaller drones. Fade to black. Fade in to Scott and Greer and the team moving through the dense forest. "How are we meant to find anything in this forest?" says Greer to Scott. "Just look for anything, a track, a broken branch, even bones." "Bones?" says TJ. "Yeah, you know, it's been like 10 years. Eli's not exactly a Boy Scout. The chances of him surviving in this forest is pretty slim," Scott says with a sense of dread. "Over here!" shouts a Marine. Scott runs over to the Marine. "Human footprints heading off in that direction," says the Marine to Scott. "This is a good sign. Let's follow them," Greer says with a smile on his face. The team then runs off through the underbrush, following the footprints. The camera, low to the ground, pans over to a cave in the side of the cliff as Scott's team approaches. The footprints head right inside this cave. "I'm going in," Greer says. "Wait," TJ says urgently. "It's been 10 years, and if Eli's in there, he has been alone all this time. He might not be the same person he was, mentally speaking. We should proceed with caution." The team proceeds slowly into the cave, moving cautiously and quietly, when up ahead they see a light from a fire. Creeping up and in the cover of shadows and rocks, Scott looks over the rocks towards the fire and sees a long-haired, thin, muscular human covered in rags, crouched over the fire, eating a cooked piece of animal meat. "Eli?" Scott says, stumbling forward, knocking over some rocks and making a noise. The ragged human grunts, stands up and grabs a makeshift spear and looks over towards the rocks and stands with the spear pointed forward in a threatening manner. Scott looks at Greer and stands up slowly, moving out of cover and towards the human. The human grunts and takes a step back, thrusting the spear in an aggressive manner towards Scott. Scott's face still shrouded in the shadows, he moves forward and shines his torch at the human's face, revealing Eli. Scott steps forward again and says, "Eli, is that you?" Eli, looking at Scott, drops his guard and sighs, "You're not real, leave me alone." And just as Eli goes back to eat the meat, Greer and TJ appear from behind the rocks and shout, "It's us, Eli!" Eli then stops and turns around. He stares at the team sternly, mumbles to himself while grabbing and shaking his head. "It can't be. It's been so long. You're just in my head." Scott moves closer to Eli. "We are real, buddy. We survived and are here to bring you home." Eli then drops to his knees and starts to cry upon realizing this is real. "You are real and you survived. I've been alone for so long," as Eli says with tears in his eyes. Scott kneels down next to Eli and gives him a hug. "You saved us. Now let's get you home." Eli stands up and, now joined with the team, the whole team begins to leave the cave. Fade to black. Fade in to the bridge of the Destiny. Sparks and small explosions going off everywhere. Rush shouts, "2 more control ships have just dropped out of FTL. We're not..." Beep 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 beep. The console beeps. The Stargate has just activated, Rush shouts over the explosions. The camera then cuts to the gate room as Scott and the team, along with Eli, step through. With explosions going off in the background, Scott says, "What the hell is going on?" Eli runs over to the control console and hits a few buttons. "It's the drones." He then runs off in a hurry. "Wait, Eli, where are you going?" Scott says while chasing after him. The camera then follows Eli running through the corridors with sparks and explosions going off everywhere. Eli then arrives at the bridge. Young and Rush, both surprised, shout, "Eli?" Eli, ignoring them, heads straight towards Rush and moves him out the way, and then presses a few buttons on the console, and then suddenly the FTL timer turns on and the engines hum to life. "You overrided the lockout?" Rush says, surprised. "Hermes, we're about to jump to FTL," Young says over the radio urgently. The camera then pans to the timer as it hits 0. The camera, now in space looking at the battle, sees the Destiny jumping to FTL as the drones are closing in. The Hermes, still providing cover fire, cuts to the bridge where Colonel Edwards says, "The Destiny has jumped to FTL. Track the ship and jump to hyperspace. Get us out of here." The camera cuts to the Hermes cutting through the drones surrounding the ship and opens up a hyperspace window and enters hyperspace. Fade to black. Fading. The camera, now on the bridge of the Destiny, zooms in past the crew to a rugged Eli as Young, Rush and the rest of the crew on the bridge stares in amazement as to what just happened. Eli looks up and smiles at the crew. And with that, we fade to black. We fade in on the bridge of the Destiny as the camera is focused on Eli. With joyous emotion on his face, he looks at Rush and Young as tears begin to well up in his eyes. Rush, with a smile and emotional relief, walks up to Eli and embraces him with a heartfelt hug, and after stepping back, Rush says, "What did you do?" Eli smiles. "It's good to see all of you again. I was the one who locked out the FTL engines, so I just reactivated them to get us away from the drones. Speaking of which, didn't we leave them behind in the other galaxy years ago?" Eli says with worry. Rush looks around the bridge at the faces of the crew and says, "You're right, it is strange that after all this time they would now show up right as we are now awake." Rush gets interrupted by Chloe as she runs onto the bridge shouting, "Eli!" as TJ and Greer follow behind her. She jumps at Eli and embraces him with a warm hug with tears running down her face. Eli begins to cry, wrapping his arms around her and with strong emotions says, "It's so good to see you, Chloe," as his hold tightens around her. He looks up from the hug, tears running down his face, and looks at everyone. "It's so good to see all of you again. I've been so alone for such a long time." Eli, overwhelmed by emotion, stumbles forward, fatigued, as Scott grabs him, preventing him from falling. Young, at that moment, walks over to Eli and places his hand on his shoulder. "It's good to see you again, Eli. We have no idea what you've been through all of these years, but you've saved us again. Now rest up." "TJ," Young says, "take Eli to the infirmary and check him over and make sure he recovers." "Yes, Colonel," TJ says. TJ walks over to Eli and with Scott's help, walks Eli off to the infirmary. Young turns to Rush. "Do a full system check of Destiny and see if we can contact the Hermes. Oh, and while you're at it, maybe figure out why the drones attacked us." Rush, looking concerned, says, "I may have an idea on why the drones suddenly attacked us." The camera slowly zooms in at Rush. With a worried look, he turns and gazes out the window of the bridge into space and mumbles to himself, "It's the only thing it could be." The camera fades to black. Act 2. The camera fades in on the Hermes travelling through hyperspace. The camera cuts to sparks and alarms going off on the bridge. "Sir," the lieutenant shouts, "I'm detecting a power build-up within the hyperdrive. The last hit did some major damage to the power systems. We need to drop out of hyperspace and effect repairs to the power grid." Colonel Edwards, helping an injured crewman up off the floor, shouts, "Drop us out of hyperspace and begin repairs on the power systems and find a way to communicate with the Destiny to let them know our situation." "Yes, sir," the lieutenant replies. The camera pans in on the Hermes dropping out of hyperspace. Beep, beep, beep. The alarms suddenly start going off. "What's the situation?" Edward shouts over the alarms. "Sir, there's a planet directly ahead. Brace yourself. We're caught in the planet's atmosphere. We're going in." The camera pans now in space, watching the Hermes enter the planet's atmosphere and begin to heat up. The camera now on the bridge shaking as Edwards is gripping his chair, reaching for the PA. Beep. "All hands, brace for impact." The shaking of the camera gets worse as it suddenly stops with a loud bang as the crew gets thrown forward, cut to black. The camera now outside looking down at the Hermes, crashed on the planet, smoking and embedded in the terrain with many trees broken around the crash site, slowly zooms out, showing in the distance a giant obelisk, cut to black. The camera now on the Destiny, as it's still flying at FTL, cuts to the infirmary where Eli is laying on a bed, as TJ walks in and says, "All tests look fine. Surprisingly, my only concern is malnourishment, so just rest and regain your strength." Eli smiles and says, "I spent so long hunting and gathering food that anything I'll eat will be amazing." TJ smiles. "Well, it's a good thing we have food from the Hermes now, so you can be the first one to have food from Earth again," as TJ hands a plate of food to Eli with chicken, peas, carrots, and mashed potatoes with a pot of jelly. Eli sits straight up and reaches for the food as he stops and then says, "The Hermes?" "Young mentioned the Hermes as we jumped. What's the Hermes?" Eli asks as he begins to eat. TJ brings Eli up to date with what has transpired with the Hermes, and as she finishes, Young walks in. "So, how is he, TJ?" he asks. "He's surprisingly in good health, except for being malnourished. A few good meals and he'll be back to good health in no time," TJ replies. "That's good then. So you feeling up to helping us with a problem, Eli?" Young asks with curiosity. "Sure, what you need, Colonel," says Eli, with food in his mouth. "We need to communicate with the Hermes and rendezvous with them and regroup." Young asks with worry. Eli, with a mouth full of mashed potatoes, nods, then swallows. "I'll get right on that, sir." Young smiles and then leaves and heads to the bridge. The camera now on the bridge with Rush, looking worried as he looks over the consoles. "Beep, beep, beep. Oh, not again," Rush mutters to himself as he presses a few buttons. The beeping stops. Young walks in and asks for a report. Rush, frustrated, says, "The ZPM is causing a strain on the power relays and I have to constantly divert power to prevent overloads, but I do have a theory on why the drones attacked us." "Oh?" says Young. "The Hermes is the reason," says Rush with concern. "Why would the Hermes be the cause?" asks Young. "Well, the Hermes, while travelling through hyperspace, gives off a huge subspace disturbance, and if you add the energy output of a ZPM, the disruption wave would be very intense. And my theory is that the drones detected the subspace disturbance as the Hermes travelled through the drone's galaxy. And with such a strong subspace wave, stronger than what the Stargate gives off, the drones will be drawn to it like a moth to flame. So it's imperative we contact the Hermes as soon as possible to warn them that when they drop out of hyperspace, they should expect the drones to follow shortly." Rush looks at Young with huge concern in his face as the camera fades to black. Act 3. The camera fades in over the crash site of the Hermes, still smouldering as the obelisk lurks in the background. The camera pans over a dark bridge as the crew lay unconscious, lights flashing, sparks going off all over the place. Edwards begins to wake and stands up and looks out the window of the bridge and sees the obelisk in the distance and mumbles to himself, "What the hell happened, and what is that?" The crew on the bridge begin to wake and stand up, looking around and helping their fellow crewmates up, and then begin to check the ship. The lieutenant wakes from his console and looks at the screen holding his head. "Sir, we have crashed on the planet's surface. All systems are down, but we are sending out a distress signal that activated automatically upon impact. There is no main power, only auxiliary power, and life support is offline. But the good thing is the planet has a breathable atmosphere." Colonel Edwards, turning around from the window, looks at the crew and says, "I want a full ship status update, tend to all the wounded, and see if we can get main power back online. We need to contact the Destiny as soon as possible." The camera pans over the crew as they begin to get busy as Colonel Edwards looks back out the window at the obelisk and mumbles, "I don't like the look of this," as the camera moves through the window towards the obelisk. Fade to black. Back on the Destiny, Eli and Rush are on the bridge. Eli, now looking clean and shaven in new clothes, is looking at the console, looking confused, then sighs. "I've tried everything I could think of, and I can't contact the Hermes. Something must be wrong on their end. Maybe if I try beep beep beep, the console lights up. What did you do? Rush asks. Nothing. Destiny is detecting something on a subspace frequency. Let me just calibrate. 1 second and... it's a distress signal. It's from the Hermes. The coordinates are coming in now, Eli says with urgency. Rush radios Young. Colonel, we have found the Hermes. We are setting a course now. Rush puts the radio down and looks at the coordinates and says, the Hermes location is still within the void, still many light years away from the next galaxy. Maybe they've dropped out of hyperspace and need repairs. I hope we get to them before the drones arrive, if my theory is correct. The camera pans over Destiny flying past at FTL. Fade to black. The camera in orbit over the planet that the Hermes crashed on as 2 drone control ships drop out of FTL over the planet and begin to release a swarm of drones that head for the planet. Back on the Hermes, the camera pans to the engine room where a couple of crewmen are replacing crystals in trays when the panel lights up and lights begin to turn on all around them. One of the crewmen radios the bridge. Main power is back online, sir. The camera now on the bridge shows the screens activate as the consoles come back to life. Colonel Edwards speaks. Right, now the main power is back online. Lieutenant, how about those communications? The lieutenant, frustrated, replies, still down, sir. Something is wrong with the relays. Keep trying, Edwards replies. Engine room, any luck on those engines? The camera pans to an engineer looking at a console in the engine room with a schematic of the engines flashing red. Sir, I hate to report this, but the engines are so severely damaged we need to repair them from the outside, and I don't see how that is possible in our current situation. I am sorry, there is no other way around it. The camera pans to Edwards looking upset. Understood, engine room. Do your best to get other systems up and running. Bridge out. At that moment, the crew hears a buzzing, humming noise flying over them and past the ship outside. Edwards stands up and moves towards the window to look out as he sees a dozen or so drones fly overhead. He turns around and says, Do we have shields and weapons? The lieutenant replies, Only railguns, sir. Shields are still offline. Colonel Edwards walks to his chair and sits and hits the PA. Attention crew, the drones have found us. Prepare for battle. We need to defend the Hermes. Engineering, get those shields back online. The camera pans over the Hermes as the railguns begin to rotate and fire at the drones flying around at the Hermes. The Hermes scores a few kills but begins taking direct fire from a new group of drones approaching from the other direction. The drones fly up and line up and begin a dive bomb attack. The Hermes focuses fire on the group, scoring a couple kills, but as the drones close in and just as they are about to crash into the Hermes, the shields of the Hermes activate, protecting the Hermes from the drone's collision. The camera cuts to the bridge, as over the radio, Edwards hears, Shields are back online, sir, but they are at 50%, sir. Good job, replies Edwards. The engineer responds, I tied the Asgard power core supply into the shield's systems to restore power, sir. It should provide us enough power to hold out, but several shield emitters are out, putting a strain on the rest. Understood, says Edwards. Concentrate fire on those drones. Communications, any luck on getting a signal out? I have short-range communications online, but still no long-range, sir. The camera pans over at Colonel Edwards with a stern, worried look on his face as the drones continue to bombard the ship. Fade to black. Act 4. The camera fades in on the bridge of the Destiny, still at FTL. The whole crew are in their positions with Young, Rush, Eli, Scott and Greer on the bridge. Rush says, We are approaching the Hermes. Young says, Okay, drop us out of FTL. The camera shows the Destiny dropping out of FTL, revealing a yellow star with a single planet in orbit. Beep beep beep. Alarms start going off as Rush says, This star system should not be here. Never mind that, Scott shouts. There are 2 drone control ships in orbit of the planet that are now changing direction towards us. The camera zooms past the Destiny towards the planet, showing control ships breaking orbit and heading towards the Destiny. They begin launching another group of drones from their hulls as they begin moving away from the planet. Coming back to the bridge, Eli says, I found the Hermes. It's crashed on the surface of the planet, but these readings I'm seeing, it can't be. This system is like the star system we encountered before, the one that was made. The one that sent back the shuttle we left behind. Young, surprised at this, but more concerned with the drones, says, "Raise the shields and arm weapons. Let's see if we can beat these ships before any more show up. We can worry about the star system if we win this. Lower the main gun and head straight for them." The camera pans over the Destiny, turning towards the drone ships, lowering its main gun. The Destiny begins to fire at the smaller drones, clearing a path through. Destiny gets within range of the first control ship and fires dead on, destroying it. "One down," Scott shouts. "Beep, beep, beep." The camera pans to Rush as sparks fly all around. He shouts, "The relays can't handle the ZPM's output. We have blown relays all over the ship." Scott interrupts. "The second control ship is almost in range." "Fire!" shouts Young over the explosions. The camera pans at Destiny in a hard turn, firing its main gun, clipping and destroying the control ship. The control ship explodes and the smaller drones stop dead in their tracks. "We did it!" shouts the crew. "Beep, beep, beep, beep." "The relays are going to overload," Rush shouts, trying to compensate. The camera pans over the outside of the Destiny as small explosions damage section after section of the ship, including the drive section. Destiny's engines go offline and she begins to drift. The camera, now on the bridge, sparks and explosions going off as Rush tries to stop the overload, when the power suddenly cuts out, leaving the ship in darkness. The explosions stop as it goes quiet. Eli looks up. What just happened?" Rush, confused, said, "It wasn't anything I did," when suddenly a green glow of energy encompasses the ship. Greer looking around, he says cautiously, "What the hell is this?" Fade to black. Back on the Hermes, the drones begin to fall from the sky, some colliding with the ship, others hitting the ground. The lieutenant speaks. What just happened?" Edward stands up and, with a smirk on his face, says, "Something must have happened to the control ships." And as the crew begin to cheer, off in the far distance, the obelisk begins to glow green, firing a beam of light up into the sky. Edwards looks out at the spectacle and says, "What am I looking at?" As a glow of green energy begins to surround the Hermes and begins to lift the ship off the ground. The camera pans out at the planet as two beams of green energy move the Hermes into orbit from the surface of the planet, and the other brings the Destiny towards the planet. The camera watches as both ships are placed together, next to each other, in orbit, both ships being contained within the green energy field. When suddenly, off in the distance, the Hermes detects 10 drone control ships dropping out of FTL and launching drones. The green energy field pulses, and from the obelisk on the planet, it sends a high energy beam out towards the fleet of drone ships, cutting through them, destroying each one with ease, leaving nothing remaining. The crews of both the Destiny and the Hermes look out in shock at what just happened, and before they can even respond, both ships' computers come back online and begin scrolling through all of the ship's data files. Rush on the Destiny says, "I believe whatever just did that out there and is holding us here must be scanning our computers." When suddenly the computers turn off and two green lights surround both Young and Rush and teleports them away. The bridge crew looks on with worrying looks at what the hell just happened. Over on the Hermes, the computer is still scrolling through data as Edwards looks at the display, seeing glimpses of Earth's history and other such files appear on screen, when suddenly the computer shuts off as Edwards is suddenly surrounded by a green energy field and is then teleported away. The lieutenant stands up and looks stunned at what just happened. Fade to black. Act 5, Final Act. The camera opens on a black void with no visible lights. Quiet and empty as three green beams of light illuminate the void as Young, Rush, and Edwards are transported into the void. The green glow fades as the three look at each other with puzzled looks as Young says, "What just happened?" Rush speaks up and with curiosity in his voice replies, "I believe we have just been transported off the ship, but to where, I cannot say." Edwards interrupts, "Why was it just us three that got transported?" Rush strokes his chin and ponders for a moment and then says, "It's probably because we are the leaders of the ships. The computer on the Destiny looked like it was being scanned, so whomever is responsible for this must know we hold some level of command." "You are correct, Dr. Rush," as a deep, outer-bodied voice speaks from within the void. A spotlight from above with seemingly no source illuminates the three in the dark as the voice begins to speak. Dr. Rush is correct. We have brought you three to this place as you are the leaders of your vessels. We scanned both your vessels and discovered much about you. But what has us more curious is that this is also not the first time we have encountered your species on one of our worlds. Young interrupts. So the planet we encountered that seemed to have been created, it was one of your worlds too? The voice responds. Colonel Young, you are correct. We encountered a small group of your kind with a smaller vessel. When we discovered them, they had all lost functionality, so we repaired them and returned them to you. Rush jumps in. You repaired them? You didn't repair them, you just reversed their deaths for them to die again. The voice in a different tone responds. We are unfamiliar with what you call death. We simply reversed the damage done, but it seems your organic bodies are more frail than we thought, compared to our existence. Rush, curious, steps forward to the front of the three and speaks. Death is unfamiliar to you, and your existence is different than ours? Who are you? What are you? Why are we here? The voice pauses, then shifts back to the first tone. Very curious you are, Dr. Rush. We are beyond your comprehension to understand. We are everywhere. We simply exist. We are of many, and we are of one. We don't experience your concept of time, we just are. Rush, looking back at Young and Edwards, then says to them, They sound like ascended beings. Rush turns back and with a grin says, Are you what we call ascended beings? The voice responds in a lighter tone. We encountered this term as we learnt your history from the vessel called the Hermes. We are similar to what you have encountered before, but different. We have always been. Rush interrupts. You're different from ascended beings? The voice shifts tones again. We are what we are, and right now we are curious about you. Why are you here? What do you want? Young steps forward and speaks. We are explorers, and we are here by accident. We travelled to the Destiny from our home galaxy and have been on board since, with no way to get home. Rush interrupts. The Destiny was sent to explore the universe by our ancestors millions of years ago, to uncover the structure discovered within the moments of the universe's creation. Do you know what this is? Rush asks very nicely. The voice responds with one word. No. Rush's face shifts to a disappointed frown. And what of the other vessels? Why are you here? The voice says. Edward steps forward and responds. The crew of the Destiny were lost to my people. It's within our nature to never leave our people behind, so me and my crew have travelled far to rescue the crew of the Destiny and bring them home and repair the Destiny as best we can, so she may continue on her mission to uncover the mysteries of the universe. The voice replies, We understand now. Your species is very unique. You have a curious nature like ours, but are limited by your own mortality. You exist in the moment. Rush interrupts. Yes, we are a curious species, but can you help us? We need help. The voice begins to mutter to other voices in the void as Young turns to Rush and says, What are you doing? Rush responds, They have the ability to help us. What's the harm in asking? The voice responds, What is it you want from us? Rush turns to Edwards and Young and talks to them about what they could ask for, and after a few moments they all nod and Rush turns around and speaks. We need help. Both of our ships are damaged. Can you repair them like you did with the shuttle? And a lot of our people want to go home to Earth, our home planet. Can you help us send them home? The three stand in the void waiting for the voice to respond as Rush stands there with a hopeful look on his face. The voice then speaks. We can do as you ask. Both vessels will be restored, and we can send those who want to go to your homeworld home. Edwards interrupts. You can just send us home just like that? The voice responds. It is simple. We are everywhere. It is easy as moving from one position to another using your legs. Edwards looks at Young and Rush and says, "A lot of my crew want to stay on the Destiny, and a lot of the Destiny crew want to go home. The Hermes was always meant to be a rescue mission that returned home to Earth. Shall we ask them to send the Hermes home with all of those that want to go home too?" Young nods and then turns to the voice. "Can you send the Hermes to Earth after we have asked our people who want to stay and who wants to go?" The voice responds, "We can. It's simple. We will send you back to your vessels so you can communicate with your people. When you are ready to go, we will know." The voice stops as green energy surrounds the three when they are suddenly on the bridge of the Destiny. The camera pans over the bridge of the Destiny, all shiny and new, as Eli stood there amazed at what just happened. Eli sees Rush, Young, and Edwards and asks in a shocked tone, "What the hell just happened? One moment you were here, then a bright flash of light, and then everything is new, and then you just appeared out of thin air. What is going on?" Rush smiles and says, "It's okay, Eli. We will explain what has happened," as Rush walks around the bridge, amazed at how new everything looks. He sits at the console and checks the ship's systems. "This is incredible." Young walks over and asks, "What's incredible?" Rush, with an excited tone and elated, says, "The ship, it's brand new. All systems show the Destiny to be 100% repaired. No, not repaired. It's more like the ship was just built. It's incredible. Every system is brand new. The data shows that Destiny has still been through her journey and shows all the previous damage she has had over the years, but it's all gone. Astonishing." Edwards interjects, "Fascinating as this all is, we have another matter to resolve." "Ah, yes," Rush says, excited over the change in Destiny. Young hits the PA and addresses the crew and informs them all to meet in the gate room. Edwards radios the Hermes and discovers the Hermes too has been restored. He asks the crew of the Hermes to beam him over so he could discuss what has transpired. The camera pans over both ships in orbit, fully restored with no damage on either ship. The camera then pans to the gate room where Young is just finishing addressing the crew. "So that is what has happened. It is now up to each of you to decide if you want to go home or stay on the Destiny. The Destiny has become our home and you have all become my family, but this is your choice. Once you have made your choice, report to Lieutenant Scott and you'll be beamed over to the Hermes. Dismissed." Young walks down the stairs and talks to Rush. "I suspect you're staying on board the Destiny," Rush replies. "Oh, it's where I belong. This is where I'm meant to be. So yes, I'm staying." "Thought that might be your choice," Young says, smiling. Rush smiles back and they walk off together. The camera pans through the ship, showing many of the Destiny's crew packing and preparing to beam to the Hermes, as crew of the Hermes are beaming over to the Destiny, finding new living quarters to stay in, with loads of cargo from the Hermes being transported to the Destiny, with food stores, medical supplies, weapons, and many more crates of other cargo. The camera pans to the bridge of the Destiny as we see Young, Rush, Eli, Scott, Greer, TJ, and Chloe standing there looking out at the Hermes. Young radios, "Hermes, all crew and cargo have been transported over and everyone that wants to go home has been beamed aboard." "Copy that, Destiny. All the crew of the Hermes that wants to stay has beamed over to the Destiny too." From the corridor of the Destiny, we hear, "So, what's going to happen now?" as Colonel Edwards walks onto the bridge. Young looks at Edwards and smiles. "Thought you might stay." Edwards smiles back. "Destiny is my mission, Colonel. I was always meant to stay along with those of my crew that have joined me. This was always the mission, to rescue you and repair the Destiny and continue her mission." Rush looks around at the people on the bridge and smiles. "Destiny is lucky to have us, and we are lucky to have the Destiny." Everyone smiles. "Destiny, we are ready," the Hermes says over the radio. Eli says, "So, what's meant to happen now?" Rush shrugs. Not quite sure." And as soon as Rush finishes that sentence, the Hermes begins to glow with a green energy and then disappears. The crew, all mumbling, says good luck as the FTL clock chimes to life. Rush says with a smile as he looks at the crew, "It's time for us to go too. The universe isn't going to explore itself." The camera zooms slowly in on Rush as he's smiling at the crew, nodding with happiness. The camera cuts to the Destiny in all her glory as she passes the camera and jumps to FTL. Fade to black.